Dr. Jonas Kuehne.
Thank you for having me.
And I'll call after that first solid try, I'll just call you Dr. Jonas.
Perfectly good, yeah.
And I really appreciate you coming out to chat with me. I guess I have some specific questions and some general ones as well.
Perfect.
And I do, I do a podcast on radical wealth. I don't think that you can really achieve wealth if you don't have health as well.
I would agree to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Just like the some of the great health podcasters that we talk to, I think if your money situation is bad, that's going to affect cortisol levels and lots of other things.
Stress can certainly do that. Yeah.
Stress,
multiple reasons.
So you graduated UCLA medical school, and then did you ever practice medicine in a traditional sense, or?
Yes, I did. So I did my medical school and residency at UCLA, and then I actually started out in geriatrics.
Wow.
So I started at the very old spectrum, kind of fell into that, and managed. It was also Medicare patients, elderly people, and interestingly, in the US here, when you're over the age of 70, you have about 20 medications. And one of my jobs was to go in and confirm are all the diagnoses correct and can we reduce some stuff. And that was actually a pretty good job, I thought, But it was Medicare paid. So I got signed up to be paid by Medicare. And then Medicare kept paying less and less and less. And then ultimately I was like, that's not really what I want to do. I mean, I'm glad to work with these people because, man, they're fascinating. You talk to someone who's 100 years old.
Wow.
Grew up after the Great Depression and all that, picking cotton. I mean, it was amazing conversations I had with some of these elderly people, if they were still sharp. Many of them, unfortunately, affected by dementia. But then, again, it was mostly end-of-life care, right? And so now, then we worked with athletes. I did a lot of, we got cryo healthcare started. I got a machine that you've been in, the whole body cryotherapy. So anti-inflammatory treatments, essentially for, not just for athletes, but also for the general population, for all sorts of things. Originally for rheumatoid arthritis, that's what it was developed for. Sports injuries, certainly, and any inflammatory disorder, any autoimmune disorder responded very well. And then we branched out. We do IVs, I do stem cell IVs, I do a bunch of other stuff now too, yeah.
Unless I'm mistaken, inflammation is really at the heart of so many different diseases.
Yes, I certainly believe so. And all the research indicates that we can trace most illnesses back to an inflammatory process. Absolutely. And decreasing inflammation makes things a lot better. It can really help. One of the latest things in cancer research, which was interesting, there is a micro-inflammatory environment that cancer cells need to thrive. They don't need oxygen. They like a low oxygen environment, and they like an inflammatory environment. And so they're testing out some of these medications like low-dose naltrexone that kind of decreases the inflammatory environment around the tumor, and that's been shown to improve outcomes. So we know inflammation certainly is part of the disease picture, but also probably how things start. And inflammation, of course, builds up as we get older, as we have more stress, as we're unhealthy, metabolic syndrome, all these things, as we gain visceral fat, the fat around our organs, which is the worst fat, highly inflammatory. It might also lead even to things like cognitive decline, dementia, all these things unfortunately related. So we do exactly so when we decrease inflammation, at least what we can manage, that's helpful, but it has to go hand in hand with some lifestyle changes usually.
One of the things that I wanted you to comment on, is it's a personal experience that I have had, but I feel like it's not isolated to me. And that is that, I have a family history of prostate cancer. Unfortunately, a brother who has significant prostate cancer disease. And they use I don't need to get too technical with it because it's its own thing, but they use a basic blood test, PSA, which I'm familiar with, to measure that. And at my age, for example, they have a certain number, and that number is 4.0 on PSA, that's really a red flag. And given the family history that I have, I wanted to be extra vigilant. No one was telling me other than my brother and me. So my medical care team is not saying like, hey, be extra vigilant. But I was being extra vigilant. And then I was watching my PSA climb and climb and climb. And I went to see, and I have an internal care medicine doctor at a fancy institution, well-trained, and sends me to a urologist, which of course is a specialist. And I get the blood drawn and the result comes back at 3.9, which is showing a very steady straight line growth to 4.0, which is the sort of danger marker. And his advice to me was to come back in 6 months. And I was just stunned. So like, what am I going to do between now and 6 months? And the answer is, his recommendation was nothing other than to, instead of coming back in a year, let's say, come back in 6 months. But that's not preventative. So what I hear in that is, come back and see us when you have cancer.
Not exactly. I mean, the PSA, the prostate-specific antigen, is a very crude marker. It doesn't tell you if you have cancer or not. It says the likelihood is higher if we cross that 4.0 mark, right? But again, even benign prostatic hypertrophy, you will still have changes in your PSA. So it's not indicative necessarily of that, but it's certainly something to look at. I agree with that. We can also sometimes see when we treat prostate cancer, if that marker then goes down afterwards, this is something to monitor for sure. But not doing anything, sure. I mean, I would still say there are things you can do. And also the other thing is, if you're highly concerned, one thing is you can certainly do imaging. You could do an MRI of the prostate. It doesn't always specifically show something. Some at close to the 4.0 borderline, some physicians might do a biopsy, which to me, honestly, I'm not always a fan of that. There's certain risks with that as well, of course. But again, if you need to observe, but the things you can do in the meantime, again, changes, and you're already probably doing many of these, is improving, for example, your diet, like cutting out the things that cancer likes, which is, for example, a high sugar diet. Improving, again, we talked about visceral fat, we talked about inflammation, being healthier. As the healthier you are, the less likely these cells are to grow at a fast rate, if there are any at all. And again, keep in mind, this PSA doesn't say that you have cancer or not. It's just that one of the markers that we can monitor. It's a very crude marker, right?
It's very complex for a layperson to understand. I educate myself on it a lot, and I totally get that it's not a direct marker, right. And it's still a good thing to measure. It's not a direct marker. I get that. The beef that I had really was, the advice really, whether it's a crude marker or not a crude marker, the advice that I got essentially was, just come back and we'll test it again. But there was zero preventative advice even offered. Right.
And again, I would at least do certain lifestyle changes. Some supplements might be helpful. And I don't know if you guys discussed medications. There are medications that, it's like these 5-alpha reductase inhibitors, they may be helpful here. Again, it's not my field, so I don't know too much about those. Saw palmetto pygeum is an herbal that might be something that's helpful. Again, how helpful they are when your PSA is rising, will they stop that? I would have to relook at the literature. I don't know for sure if that makes a huge difference or not. But these are things that are helping, at least for the growth of the prostate. When we think of BPH, which is benign prostatic hypertrophy, giving things like, finasteride, for example, and it's also used for hair. It's called Propecia at 1 milligram, but the finasteride is something that can prevent the conversion of testosterone to dihydrotestosterone, DHT. And the DHT is one, it's bad for the hair follicle, but can also cause prostatic growth. So that's something that, again, some medications that's something that he should probably discuss with you, because that's his field.
So, and I did not want to go down the bunny trail of specifically of PSA. The thing that one of the reasons why I love talking to you about this or about other things is it's not specific to my specific concern, but that there's a field that people refer to as functional medicine. And there's a field that people refer to as longevity. And I've heard longevity doctors talking about the challenges of getting funding, because really the money, the research money is going to, cancer research, which of course is a great thing. And, American Heart Association is a lot of funding for coronary disease, which of course these are important things. And the longevity doctor is saying, hey, by the way, if you give me a little bit of money, I'm going to really impact cancer and heart disease, but really it's in a preventative way, as opposed to, okay, we found a new chemotherapy, which is less toxic, therefore more effective. Everybody wants that. We want, even if we don't have this cancer, we want that for everyone. But I think, don't we really want to avoid it to begin with?
Absolutely. So the best way to treat a disease is to avoid having it in the first place. And we know enough now that there are strategies where we can prevent many diseases if we, it requires some work on the part of the patient, because you need to sort of make certain changes. And this, you need to be knowledgeable in what you put in your body, how you exercise, certain supplements. All these things can play a huge role. The unfortunate thing is there is no money. So the pharmaceutical industry is not interested in this model. And interestingly, even the medical education. So we are heavily influenced by the pharma industry, of course. And the model has been so far, you present with some illness and then we figure out what it is. And then we give you a strategy on how to treat it, right? And that, of course, is the most lucrative in terms of the pharmaceuticals we need and the surgical interventions and all that, But that's, of course, not in your interest. Your interest would be, hey, how can I, even if I have, especially when if I have a family history, take steps to prevent getting the disease in the first place. And I think that's also why I'm very interested in. But you're absolutely right. There's hurdles. There are treatments that are sort of fighting to recognize. I mentioned earlier the low-dose naltrexone. That's new data. This is a dirt cheap medication, naltrexone. This is one of the medications we know from addiction medicine, right? And we're talking about a tiny dose here, like 4.5 milligrams. And that has been shown to work very well for people, but there's tons of preclinical data. We know the mechanism, we know that it works. If you do this in vitro, you see great results and all that. You might do animal studies, but we're lacking the human data. And that's where the cost comes in. If you do good clinical studies, they cost a lot of money. And there's other medications that have been used for cancer quite successfully. But again, it's only preclinical, so we can't recommend them yet. There's a combination of, mebendazole and ivermectin, for example. Couldn't say that word like 3 years ago, But again, this was something that predates COVID. It's been studied to treat cancer, has some good mechanism where it triggers apoptosis of cancer cells. This is the ivermectin part. And even, I believe, cancer stem cells. And this is all preclinical. These are not clinical trials. So this hasn't been to the point where we're saying, hey, we had a population, we did this, here's our control group. This is how they did when they took it, right? But there's so much preclinical data that some physicians are now using it. There's a Canadian guy you might have heard of, Dr. William Mackes, and he actually prescribes that now. He's an oncologist and he's seen great improvement or really miraculous changes in his population, which is, of course, a great thing. Now, again, medications, mebendazole works differently. It interrupts, I think, microtubules, and it also disrupts the ability of the cell to take sugar up. And remember, cancer cells thrive on sugar. When you can block the sugar uptake, specifically in those cells, that's great. Other effects, when we talk about cancer prevention, the theory is more and more that we might look at it the wrong way, that we thought of cancer as a genetic disease, where you have a gene mutation that then disrupts the ability of the cell to determine how it divides. And this becomes an uncontrolled cell division, right?
Right.
Now the more modern thinking of some physicians and researchers is, well, this might be downstream. It might start with we talked about an inflammatory process that ultimately leads to mitochondrial dysfunction. Because when we look at cancer cells, mitochondria are these kidney bean looking like things in the cells that make ATP, our energy. Without that, nothing functions. It's the most important. Those are the motors of our engines, right? And when you look at cancer cells, they have malfunctioning mitochondria. The mitochondria can't do this elaborate citric acid cycle where they take sugar and makes 36 ATP per molecule. They can only ferment. It's a very primitive way of energy production, 2 ATP per sugar molecule. And therefore, they need tons of sugar. So they thrive on that. That's number one. And again, by changing dietary patterns, by taking sugar away, we can help. Ketogenic diet works for some cancers, but not for all, because they also can ferment glutamine, which is an amino acid. That's new data, right? So again, medications that can inhibit the uptake of nutrients to these cells, or medications that can cause apoptosis, are very good. And many of these medications exist already, and that's the problem we have. Because if they're out of patent, and if they exist, and if they're cheap, and I don't know the exact cost, but I think Ivermectin, but it's cents, right? No pharmaceutical company, and I'm not blaming them,
that's right,
in their right mind, would invest any money in this.
That's right.
It's something you can't do.
And that's what I was thinking that when you were talking about low dose, because I am taking low dose naltrexone. Yeah. And it was FDA approved at a much higher dose for addiction. Yeah. So therefore because as I understand it, FDA approval is based on how dangerous is it to the patient, and then also how effective it is. So first stop is, let's make sure it's not really hurting people. And that's a high hurdle. Once you clear that hurdle, then they're like, okay, well, let's test the effectiveness. That's a lower hurdle. Yeah.
So it's verbiage ultimately. So, right. Well, number one is, of course, it has to be safe. So they have to say, well, here's the safety data, right? But then in order to make a claim, to say, I'm giving you this medication to treat this condition, now I'm making a claim, right? You have to show a study that proves that. And that has to be done in accordance with the requirements of the FDA. And they have a pretty high bar, right? And that's expensive. And you need a big patient population. You need to submit to them. You need to have, ideally double-blinded, placebo-controlled groups over a certain period of time. And that costs a lot of money, right, to do. And then ideally you hold that patent for X amount of years to monetize your investment, right?
Right.
Again, not here, but that's my beef right now is, again, I understand the pharma industry doesn't want to do it, but our government should do it.
Yeah.
And we should have that interest where we're saying, hey, listen, don't you want a healthy patient population? Wouldn't you want to study some of these things at least,
So for example, to put that into like real terms, naltrexone, of course, at one point in time, so it passed the high bar of safety, and then it passed the bar of efficacy for treatment of addiction. And so, I imagine they had a patent. They don't have it anymore. So now the cost of the drug has gone down so dramatically that it's these drugs that aren't on patents are cost pennies. And when it was approved at 100 milligrams a day in terms of safety, you don't have to be able to do much math to realize that at 4.5 milligrams, it's going to be extraordinary. It was extraordinarily safe at 100 milligrams. So it's going to be safe at 4.5 milligrams. But the problem is there's no money to test it for these other really very important causes.
Right. And then one argument we can make then is saying that, well, fine, we're giving it usually at 100 milligrams, but I'll give it to you over a period of 3 weeks and then we're done. Now you're looking at a much lower dose, but you're having a daily use for longer periods of time, right? And that's the same with, Ivermectin. I think it was used mostly to treat river blindness, right? And Africa, it got the Nobel Prize. It's on the World Health Organization's drugs of essential medicines, but it's been used 4 billion times, I believe, 4 billion doses in human use, right?
Wow.
So it's a lot, but again, they might take it every week, even in Africa, right? Preventively. But again, when we look at the use of this medication for like cancer, you would use it daily, right? Maybe at a higher dose. The dose, the safety has always been good. And I looked at those studies back then. They gave, in a research group, 10 times the treatment amount. So if someone took 10 times the treatment dose, didn't see an adverse effect. At some point, the liver becomes, it bugs your liver, but that's rare, right? So I think the safety is there. The question is still then taking this daily versus taking it once in a while, right? I mean, sure, there's arguments can be made, but these are things that you can follow a patient population for a certain period of time. And as you follow their labs, you can see, hey, are there any issues? But again, the interest is not there in the industry. I hope that, I mean, with the new government now, that seems to be a bit more, let's say, interested in allowing non-conventional treatments, which I think might be a good thing, because we do want validity for them. Because if you have unconventional treatments with no validity, then they become a laughing stock. Then people are like, well, I can't take this seriously because I don't have the data, right? So having the data would be great, you know? And
the supplement industry is obviously a multi-billion-dollar industry. Right. And then, they fly under the radar because, just because it's natural doesn't mean it's toxic. You could some really very toxic organic stuff, for sure. So there's that sort of fallacy. And then, my brother, who's very, went to MIT and is very like data, very data and also very sensitive to what he would say the snake oil salesperson. So they're gonna give you this stuff and they're gonna charge you for it, and it's got like zero statistics behind it. One of the things that I look at is, of course, cost is a factor. Safety is a factor. And then if there's a little bit of evidence, if it's like, it doesn't cost that much and it's really very safe and there's some data that it helps, I'm like, well, okay, that sounds good enough for me.
Yeah. The issue is with the supplement industry, some are great, right? And they're high quality. Some are not. And I've worked with some companies, for my channel, I tested some products and I always ask them, how do you do your quality control?
Sure.
How do you test? Because ultimately they all get their raw ingredients probably from the same place. Much of it comes from China.
Right.
But as long as they test them, and not only testing them for impurities, for heavy metals, for contaminations, but also then for, is the active ingredient in there in the amount they say? Because they're not really obligated. No one does anything. The FDA, that's the thing. So you always think the FDA protects us from everything. It's only really if it's a bit in their financial interest. There are many supplements that are probably not well produced and they're on the market until there's an adverse event. And then maybe they get flagged, right? But for you, it's like the problem is like you're trying something out. The bottle will say, hey, this is the amount. And there might have been even a small study or preclinical data saying that's the right amount to take. How do you know if that's in there? Now, when you have a medication, yes, they have to prove it and it's tested and the FDA controls that, right? So therefore, the FDA, I think, is good. They don't do it for supplements. So finding a good supplement company always, I would say, if you take a supplement, you want to try it out, don't get the cheapest, do your research and see if you can have a company that says, hey, third-party tested is a good one.
Right, that's right.
And having, certificate of analysis, whatever. All these things, of course, can be, they might not be true sometimes, but at least, you get some gauge.
One of the things that I do is I use ChatGPT and I'd say, hey, I'm interested in taking this particular supplement, what's the data behind it? Sometimes it's the mechanisms. They haven't done the testing, but they do know it affects the mechanism. And I'll always ask what are the brands that are, and sometimes you can just follow a brand. So you pick a brand and they're really, really good. And then I'm like, okay, well, I don't need to worry about each thing. I'll just, if this brand has that, I'll go ahead and go with that. But I do want to, before we, I want to in this session talk some specifics about because we talked a lot in generalities, and I'd like to talk about some of the specific things that you offer and how it fits inside of this box. Because, for example, cryotherapy, I do it, it makes me feel great. There's a mood elevation. There's all these other things. How does that fit within the overall wellness area?
So that's the cryotherapy is probably the most potent anti-inflammatory treatment we have. And you walk in this chamber, minus 240 degrees Fahrenheit. You're skin gets shock frozen, essentially, right? And in the deeper layers of your skin, and then in the dermis, so right under the outer layers of the skin, you have cells in the capillary beds and even in the skin itself that then secrete anti-inflammatory proteins, cytokines. There's pro-inflammatory cytokines and anti-inflammatory, and it shifts the ratio where you have a lot more anti-inflammatory cytokines, which bring down inflammation, right? And then these pro-inflammatory cytokines like TNF-alpha and so on, IL-1, those get suppressed. And so you have essentially, you're giving your body a shot of cortisone without the cortisone side effects, right? Which is an anti-inflammatory, which is really important. And when we talked about all these disease origins linked to inflammation, that's something that at least we can, in the short run, because this effect lasts actually for a few days when you do it. I mean, you can bring down those markers. So we have people, as an example, with rheumatoid arthritis, and many of them were on immunosuppressive agents. You've heard about Humira and all these advertised, right? They bring your immune system down to manage the overreaction that causes this joint problem, right? Sometimes these medications don't work anymore, and they come to us, and many of them now only do cryo. They come out 4 or 5 times a week with normal blood markers. The disease is not gone. It's a chronic condition, but we suppress the inflammation so much that they're off medications. So that's how potent it can be, right? Not for everyone, but for many people, that's the case. Then we do LED infrared, so red light, near infrared light. And that's something that was misunderstood for a while. It's great for your skin. The red light penetrates about 1/2 inch in. It's great for your skin, for your hair, stimulates hair growth, helps with collagen production in the skin. But the near infrared, that's actually a part you don't see. It's outside of the visible spectrum. It's what you perceive as warmth from the sunlight. That's about 54% of sunlight is near infrared radiation. Goes very deep as well. They both go into the mitochondria, right? And in the mitochondria, again, we talked about mitochondria malfunction in cancer cells. Mitochondria malfunction starts also in other disease processes. Alzheimer's disease, all that we think might also be linked to mitochondrial dysfunction ultimately, right? So what it does there, it goes into those cells and it stimulates actually, amongst other things, the production of melatonin. Melatonin is, in this case, not for sleep. 95% of melatonin is made in our mitochondria, and it's an anti-inflammatory. It breaks down the free radicals produced during normal metabolism. Remember, metabolism really happens in the mitochondria as we break down sugar molecules. It's when you run your car and you produce exhaust that needs to be neutralized because they are damaging molecules. If we don't neutralize that sufficiently, by the way, if our melatonin is too low, higher risk of disease, because where do those free radicals go? All over your cell. Can they damage your DNA? Sure they can, So you have downstream effects, as we talked about earlier. So therefore, this is a great treatment because you do stimulate that. And one reason we don't get enough of this light, this near-infrared light and all that, we don't spend enough time outside anymore. You have these beautiful windows here. They're low energy glass.
Yeah,
they're filtered out. There's no near-infrared light coming in. Your light bulbs will be LED, no near-infrared light. The incandescent light bulbs, the old one, they emitted near-infrared light, right? So we had some at home. They don't have that anymore.
Oh, the incandescent. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, the incandescent light bulbs, the old ones.
That's right.
So it is so profound that they did a study on people with shift workers. And when shift workers come home and they don't have a totally dark room to sleep during the day, even through the eyelid, the light stimulates the retina and you stop secreting melatonin at night. This is the melatonin we release from the brain. And as the melatonin levels, the secretion is decreased, their risk of cancer goes up. And that is partially because, again, melatonin is an antioxidant. So that's so profound, that correlation, right? So again, that's why having functioning healthy mitochondria is protective of your cells. So that's why the LED near-infrared light, right? We do IVs, of course. We do injections of vitamins because a lot of times now we don't absorb vitamins very well. Our digestive tract, as we get older specifically, also the absorption goes down, the ability for us to take stuff in. And that's been very popular. We do NAD+. I do stem cells. That's much more, it's a bigger price, of course. Umbilical cord stem cells, they repair. That's the treatment where, when you think of cancer, which is an interesting one, I'm circling back to that since we brought it up initially, there used to be contraindication of taking your own stem cells. You can harvest them from your fat and bone marrow, right? Our own stem cells are very old. They're as old as you are plus 30 years. Because when you're born, I would say they're like 30-year-old contractors and building, right?
Wow.
Now, when you add to that, whatever, let's say 40 or 50 years, then the problem is they're not very good anymore. And when you put them in a Petri dish, at least next to a cancer cell, they don't recognize that cell. They might support that cell, right? Which is not what we want. Umbilical cord stem cells are from newborns, from healthy C-section births. It's the birth tissue that usually gets discarded. Now, these cells don't have a fingerprint. They become your own cells to some extent, but they also recognize cancer cells and they will kill them. Mm-hmm. They trigger apoptosis. So these cells, so that treatment can be helpful for many reasons. One, autoimmune disorders respond well, and joint disorders respond well. They rebuild in a healthy way, mm-hmm. right? So those are the most profound treatments. There's a few others that we do, but that's something why people come in. Again, so bringing down inflammation, healthier mitochondria, getting the right nutrients in, and that's important as well. Mm-hmm. One thing, by the way, preventively, vitamin D, we talked about that, and you've taken all those. I know that. D3, K2, highly protective actually, mm-hmm. right? And then
it's easy to take. Plus, again, mm-hmm. you recommended that. We did it based on blood tests, so it's a real mm-hmm. thing. I was lower in mm-hmm. vitamin D than you'd want to be, and then I just go through ChatGPT mm-hmm. and say, well, what's the best vitamin D3 K2 combination, and I get a couple of brands and in the right amounts, and I just have my blood drawn again, so we'll see what that looks like.
ChatGPT,
ChatGPT. It's you on one hand, you don't want to be your own doctor. On the other hand, if I did not advocate for myself, even with really what's considered to be gold standard healthcare. And it's sad that I feel like that's not the case.
But that's a good point you brought up, because as you mentioned, I think that's common now that people don't really have a primary care doctor anymore where you can go and talk about these things. Also, most primary care doctors are overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. They don't have the time necessarily to sit down with you and talk, right? And the issue is why I like ChatGPT is, it might not always be 100% because it will react to what you feed it, right? Sure. If you give it the wrong information, it can't give you the right answer, right? So you have to be very specific. But it's good at it because it's searching all these databases, and I think it's helpful. And there is a need for more primary care, and it's got to start somewhere. And I think that mm-hmm. can be part of that. I think there needs to be more beyond that. But mm-hmm. I think, because when you take your health a bit in your own hands, it becomes very powerful. Mm-hmm. Because like you said, we'll just go home and wait and then come back. That feels lousy, right? Because you're terrible. That's not good.
Terrible.
And I think that's also a bit misguided. I think, there are a lot of things you can do to become healthier and decrease that risk, especially come to cryo healthcare, of course, but besides that, other things. But I mean, really that you have the power to influence your health. And a lot of us is really, I fell into this because, I went away from traditional medicine, from geriatrics, really to do something else. And I like it, but it requires research, mm-hmm. I have to read tons of stuff, but I like it, that's my field. New stuff comes out, I read it, mm-hmm. and you have to educate yourself continuously. That stuff's not taught in medical school. You don't learn much about vitamins, nutrition, and all that. It's crappy, but maybe a handful of lectures and get the food pyramid in the end.
Sure. That's about it. And it's mm-hmm. not that uncommon for even a really, really highly trained profession, having been to business school and having been to law school. They're in 3 years, basically doctors are going to work in a fairly specialized field. Mm. And so that really comes down to like one class you took, or, if I use law school, which I'm more familiar with, of course, it's like, you're taking one class maybe in the field that you would be practicing. So really you're learning a lot more on the job. Right? Yeah, you are. So one thing is, I feel bad because, I have a subscription to Cryo Health, and I haven't been in a long time. So I've got to take advantage of the great things that I have at my fingertips. I'm committing to that for myself. Yeah. And then also exploring some of these other things. So cryotherapy, LED. Mm-hmm. The other thing too is I listen to Peter Attia, mm-hmm. And one of the things that I like that he talks about, because he puts things into perspective, is he talks mm-hmm. about all-cause mortality. Mm-hmm. And so basically, strip everything away, what's the percentage that this thing is going to is going to kill you. And if you eradicated it, you know, how much more health. And it does put things into great perspective. So for example, one of the highest ones, it's like very correlated to death, is smoking. You know, so you have, you know, it causes heart disease, it causes all sorts of things. And then right underneath that is I'll contrast that, because I did the research. I actually guessed, but I guessed correctly. And I think I guessed correctly for the wrong reasons. You know, I by happenstance, I hit it right. Curing prostate cancer would lower all-cause mortality by 1%. And I guessed at that because, and I'm sure I came at it the wrong way, but you know, first of all, women don't get prostate cancer. So I'm like, okay, well, 50%, we'll start with that. And then my brother told me, you know, 98% of prostate cancer is what is referred to as indolent, which means it essentially will not kill you. So I'm like, okay, so that leaves 2%, but women don't get it. So I'm going to guess 1%. Now, you know, I let ChatGPT do all the research. It did come at 1%. I'm not sure it happened that way. So that's just to put it in perspective, because prostate cancer is a very serious male cancer. And yet, you know, if you eradicated it, it would decrease 1% total all-cause mortality across the population. Whereas smoking, let's put smoking aside and say we don't smoke, metabolic disorder, which is, you know, some sort of combination of being overweight and not eating right and all these sorts of things, you know, then it like increases your cancer risk, it increases your heart disease risk, it increases all of these things. And so that's why folks like Peter Attia think that, you know, there certainly are better ways to do it, but if you can't get at it any other way, that these GLP inhibitors like Ozempic, you know, are ultimately effective. But I do know that you offer a weight loss program. And when I look at all-cause mortality, you know, I'm worried about the thing that's 1%, because I'm going to say for me, it's not 1%. First of all, I'm male. Right. That would be 2%. Secondly, I've got this family history, so I'm worried about it. But it's not rising to the level of this, like metabolic syndrome is huge. It's way above heart disease, because it causes heart disease, it causes cancer. So tell me about your weight loss program, which is more natural than GLP inhibitors. So
we do use medications. I don't use GLP-1s. I mean, I'm a bit, again, there's still some unknowns and long-term issues that I have with them. But we use traditional weight loss medications. So we use some appetite suppressants, but ultimately that's part of it only, because we really change dietary patterns. And it's simple things, you know, making sure you eat more protein, which most people don't do. Get to, you know, about 0.8 gram per pound ideal body weight in your protein intake daily. Have more food earlier. The pattern's always the same. People are like, I don't know why I gain weight. You know, I wake up, I don't eat anything. I have my coffee with creamer and whatever, agave. And then, of course, they break their fast as they do that. You know? Right. So
for sure.
And then 1 o'clock, I have my first meal. Then it goes downhill. Yeah, no shit, because you waited too long. You didn't have any protein in the morning. You are now craving. Your metabolism is really low because you have a shortened eating window. Now it's too short. We usually like 9 to 10 hours, or 8 to 10 hours, right? And then you're eating crap, right? And then because your metabolism is low, you're going to gain a lot of fat. So this is not good. You're miserable, you're hungry all the time, and you're eating shit, you know? Sorry, eating bad stuff. You can cut that out. But so the pattern that we change it to is very simple. You wait about a couple hours after you wake up and start with a big breakfast with a lot of protein. I have like a 70-gram protein shake in the morning, and then I have some eggs and all that. So I eat a lot in the morning, right? At 6, because I wake up at 4:30. And then I'll have a big lunch, and also a lot of protein, another 50 grams of protein for lunch. And then I'll have a small dinner early, like around 4. And then the rule is 5 hours before you go to bed, stop eating, brush your teeth, no more calories until the next meal next day. So 14, 15 hours of real fasting. And that means don't put anything in your coffee, tea, or whatever, you know, because even sweeteners can slightly bump insulin up. It's interesting, you know, even though they have no calories. That signal that we perceive as sweetness might trigger a small release. Yeah, once you spike insulin, even artificial. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, you could still do that. So you stick to that. You have big breakfast, good lunch, small dinner, enough protein. Don't eat between your meals, only drink water, You should be very full because you're eating a lot of protein in a day. And then you stop eating 5 hours before bed. That's the pattern. But to establish that pattern, that's why I use the medication. Because initially, that's the hurdle. Oh, I'm so hungry at night and all that, And so let me give you some medications to control that, to help you in the time as you adjust to the diet. But that's not the case when they crank out these injectable weight loss drugs. They just say, here you go. And us being Americans, we love it, right? It's like you have a solution in a pill or pen.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And I will say that I have controlled my weight very effectively, fasting and people would, I do like the extra credit of being, of people thinking that I'm Superman when in fact it's actually easier. And what I find is I'll either fast 22 hours a day, which people put you in the Superman category, or I don't. And when I don't is when I have breakfast. And then when I have breakfast, then, I sleep, I wake up, and I'll have a very healthy breakfast. And then I'll, drink a lot of water. And then I just won't eat again until dinner. And I just want you to know that when I do that, and I'm talking about high quality breakfast. So I'll have, organic pasture raised, eggs with, salmon and, almost no carbs. And then I'll have black coffee and lots of water. And really on those days, I'm starving, just so you know, absolutely starving. And when I fast 22 hours, I mean, and I'll tell you when I'm starving, if I have that at 8 a.m., 8:30, like 12:30, 1 o'clock, I am I'm angry, hungry.
But that's a good time for your next meal anyway. That's good,
True. Yeah. And when I go 22 hours, the truth is I actually am hungry. So if you said to me at 12:30 or 1, are you hungry? I'd be like, yes, I'm hungry. But I'm not angry, starving, crazy hungry. And then it just keep going. And then by, 8 or 9 o'clock at night, I'm very hungry. Right. But it does turn out for me that the 22 hours is actually easier than having that meal in the middle.
Yeah. And by the way, this is also a tool that when you talk to your doctor, fasting, one of the great ways to treat or prevent cancer.
Absolutely.
They need energy all the time. If you withhold the energy, many cells will die. So this is another good tool. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things we do is we do a fire round, and these are great deep questions. We could talk for an hour on each, but I'm not going to answer. That helps a lot. And so, what is your idea of perfect happiness?
Perfect health.
What's your greatest fear?
Being useless.
What's the best compliment you've ever gotten?
That I'm a great dad.
What's an insult you've received that you're proud of?
Very stubborn.
What's the trait you most deplore in others?
Deplore
in others. Dislike, gravely dislike in others.
Given up too soon.
What's the trait you most deplore in yourself?
Being impatient.
What do you consider to be the most overrated virtue?
Striving for the wrong happiness.
What's the quality you most like in a person?
Honesty.
Which talent would you most like to have?
Thinking faster.
What's your most treasured possession?
My children.
What do you consider to be your greatest achievement?
Really building my clinic to where it's now.
If you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
Helping people be healthier.
In LA, we have some great hikes. We have some great hikes near where we live.
Yeah.
And you go on one of these hikes. You go by yourself. You hike all the way up to the top. It's a good, hardcore climb. You get to the top. You look over the vista and you look down. There's Amelia and your kids and the people you work with and all of your patient body, colleagues, friends. There's your community down below, and you shout one thing. What do you shout?
I love you.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really, really appreciate it.
No, appreciate it. It was
really
great.
Nice.
Thank you.